to put this in context, I think that we would want to imagine ourselves in our ancestors' place or those who were in the boarding school era. As a parent, I know that thinking about this stuff, it reminds me of my children or my grandson, and if they were just one day taken away and I had no idea where they were at. Others knew that they were coming and they would hide their children in the woods. Some would send them because they had no food to feed them and thought that it was a better choice rather than being at home and starving. But no matter which way these children were taken, it affected their parents, their grandparents, and all of the future generations from then on through historical trauma.
My whole life I heard a story from my mom about the Genoa Indian School. She had a sister, her name was Mildred Lowe, and she was taken to Genoa like in the late 20s. She was just a little girl. And my mom always told me that she never came home, that they sent word back to my grandmother, Laura Eliza DeCora, that she was sick and they wanted my grandma to come get her. Well, in the late 30s, people weren't driving cars and there wasn't a way to get her home, so my grandma couldn't go. And then they sent word that she had passed away. And I heard this story from the time, long back as I can remember. So I must have been, 5, 6. She had told us this story, and whenever she told us this story, she was always real sad about that, because not only did my auntie not come home, but my mom also had a brother in Wisconsin that she had never seen. And so for all of you out there, you understand this loss of culture and family, this loss of language, this loss of everything that makes you who you are. And I always felt that with my mom, that she was lonely and that she had lots of loss. But she talked about my Aunt Mildred a lot, about her not ever coming home, and that always just made me wonder why. How does that happen? How does that happen, and why does it happen? So this last year I did some research consulting work with Sunshine at the museum, and I started looking at Genoa, and I've made a couple visits out there to talk to people and just to see what's going on out there. And I was, like Isaac said, the first time I ever went out there, I just felt horrible. I just felt this heaviness in my heart, because when I got there, I asked if my aunt was there. I said, "Aunt Mildred, are you here? Are you here?" And I just felt awful. And they have a stone by that building that talks about the children who were there. And I just cried, and I laid down tobacco and prayed for her spirit. I said, "I come to get you. It's like my mom sent me to get her." She always said, "Sister, see what you could find out about, my sister." So, that had to be like 65 years ago. So this has been a long journey for me. And in the last year, Sunshine gave me an opportunity to really dig deep into those digital files, and then I made a couple journeys out there with a friend of mine she has relatives who are lost at Haskell. So we've been on this mission to find our spirits of our ancestors, our relatives. So we went out there, and we had the fortune to run into one of the docents there, and I told her my story, and she was like, "Oh, well, here, let me take your information." So she did, and they started looking for my Aunt Mildred's name. They didn't even have record of her being there, but the work I did at the museum, I found her, that she was there in certain dates. And so I told those people that, and they started looking. I said, "And she died there. She died at Genoa from disease." And so they said, "Well, we'll check the death certificates." So last week, I got the death certificate of my Aunt Mildred. And relatives, I don't know how to feel about this. You know, I don't know how, and, you know, my mom is gone now. She didn't get to see this. And my grandma is gone, and all my mom's other sisters, they're all gone. And this is all that's left, is this death certificate to even acknowledge that she was alive and at Genoa. So it's a hard thing to take this all in, but you know, that's how we do. That's how we do as Native people who have gone through this trauma and this history of ours. And my mom always said that Grandma said she died from meningitis, which is a common ailment among institutions. Meningitis and those kinds of diseases that get passed around from student to student. And it said meningitis secondary to influenza and pneumonia. And evidently she had pneumonia in her right lung, it says. It also has that they brought her home to Winnebago to bury her, but there's no record of her here. I checked when I first came back to the reservation to work about 20 years ago. I checked out there, and my grandmother's buried up there, but of course there's no marker, but they did not have record of Mildred Lowe. So I've been working with them now, and they have some old records, so they're checking to see, because she came home February 10th, 1930. So, and she was 12 years old when she passed away. So I keep this right by my chair, and I break it out and I look at it. It has the name of her father too, who I never knew who her father was. And has my grandmother's name as her mother, and you know, the superintendent and all. There's a lot of information on these, and that she passed. But the main thing, they said that burial, cremation, or removal, and it said they took her. It said she was buried in Winnebago, February 10th, 1930. So now that's my next mission, is working with the burial people to try to find out if she really did come back, or if they had a unknown that came back that didn't get written down correctly. And I don't know if there's any hope of finding her grave, because there's so many unmarked old graves, you know. But just if I knew that she came back, that's the main thing, because that spirit wandering around bothers me. I kind of been taught that, you know, we got to put our spirits of our relatives and our ancestors at rest. And I spend a lot of time working with the ancestors and spirits, trying to, you know, fix things like that. But anyway, so when I went to Genoa to visit, they said they thought the cemetery was down by this canal. So my friend and I, we went down there, and there's nobody there, I could tell. And they brought in that ground penetrating radar and tried to find them. They couldn't find anything there. But what's there is this great big power plant smokestack. And I'm wondering if they didn't cremate people over there. You know, I don't know. And whether that's wrong or right, I don't have any right to judge that either. I'm just saying they didn't keep very good track of what they did with our kids when they passed away, I think. So that we have to get it fixed somehow. I don't know. For me, I just want to know she's home here. That's what I want to know. And when I go over there to that other side, I'll meet her and talk to her then. And she'll know that I was trying to find her. And that's all I know.
Between 1869 and 1960s, and even later in some states, we are all aware that there were boarding schools or residential schools in the United States. Those were started by Captain Richard Henry Pratt, And one of his speeches that he gave in 1892, one of the famous sayings he's known for is, "Kill the Indian and save the man," which was the focus of these boarding schools. You know, our children weren't taken nicely. You know, they were stolen, kidnapped, you know, taken from families by threats, you know, different things, and that all led to a lot of historical trauma. And by 1900, there were 20,000 or so of our children in boarding schools, and by 1925, that number had nearly tripled. But that's just an estimation as well. You know, we will probably never know the full numbers. The way that they kept records then was, you know, all paper, obviously not the best record keeping. And that is part of the issues when we are trying to find our children as well and bring them home. You know, there's very sporadic record keeping of our children. They were also sent during the summers to work with families, and some of them never returned. So besides the cemeteries at the school grounds, there's also cemeteries in the surrounding towns. So around those schools in the surrounding communities and towns, we also have to look for our children, because, you know, those children that were never returned from the outings, as they called them, for work on family farms and whatnot, you know, those that didn't come back, you know, were usually just buried at a local cemetery or on the family farm. A part of this, what we wanted to start today was opening that door regarding the trauma, historical trauma that our families, all of our families have, you know, faced this. They had tried many different ways to eradicate us, you know, the Native American populations and tribes. Some of them they did fully succeed, but, you know, I think that they were trying anything to get rid of the tribes in the United States. So I think it was like a last-ditch effort myself. This is my personal opinion. You know, how would you really hurt the heart of someone, you know, to get them to want to give up? So by doing that, you know,
you're taking away something that means so much to you. You know, like your kids are you would do anything for your kids. You would sacrifice anything for your kids. And so when I think about that time and that era, I think like, oh my gosh, you know, how much pain women and families, fathers were carrying in their heart. I can't even put myself in those shoes, you know. So I think a lot of those, just discussing with Sunshine, a lot of those issues are trickled down still, and we're still seeing those effects in our communities till this day.
So I greet you all. My Hotep name is Speaks from the Heart, and just like my husband said, it's, you know, one thing to talk about boarding schools, and I talk about them, you know, but being here is a little bit different, so I'm just here to learn. No, I'm not gonna cry in front of you, so it's kind of a weird feeling, but I'm here to learn some things today and take back some notes to Sunshine, and I hope that I'm gonna learn a lot today, and from you guys as well, so it's nice to meet you.
My name is Philip Swantek. I'm one of the founding members of the Indian School Foundation. Back in 1990, we decided that we ought to preserve the heritage of the Indian school. And I've been past president, now retired board member. And when we started this, we didn't know what we were doing. But boy, did we find out. All the records that we've come across, history we've come across, and I think in the middle 1990s, what we're kind of here for today, we were way ahead of you in honoring the students that may have died here. we thought we ought to dedicate a memorial to them, and we did, and it's right out east of the building here. And we had searched for the cemetery. We got a big maintainer down there, and where they thought it was, and he scraped off about a foot of ground, trying to find burial sites or anything. And the only thing we found in that whole area was a couple of posts. Other than that, there was nothing. So, according to one of the students that came back here, it was a quarter of a mile east of the Stiles. And he said he could remember walking down there when he was a student here. And that put it right in the middle of that power canal, that quarter mile. So if some of the remains are there, they may be in the big banks, but they've done extensive searches down there on our property. And at this day, they found nothing. And we feel bad about that, but we still honor them out of here. And we had an elder, I think, from the Winnebago tribe, when we dedicated this stone and come and blessed it and everything, and it was, for us, it's a big deal. And we never envisioned, I don't think, that we'd be where we are today with what we're trying to do. And we have great pride in our school. And some of the, I'd have to say, some of the news articles that's came out has kind of shed a negative light on what we've done here. But in the 32 years, we've accomplished a lot. We preserved the building. We got tons and tons of records of Native Americans that they can come and look through our files and find their history. And we hope, I hope, that the outcome of this will be very positive. Because we are, as a foundation, are all volunteers. And we are just as concerned or more concerned than you are to honor these past students.
Myself, for the Winnebago tribe, we see this in, alcoholism, addiction, various addictions, abuse. There's physical, mental, sexual abuse in our tribes, although we don't like to discuss it. But I think it's important that if we speak on things, that hopefully that will help us bring healing to our community. And how do you see it in your own community?
So me and Sunshine had talked, so how I see the effects is definitely for me, we talk about the boarding school era and time, and then the Relocation Act during the 1950s, around.
Yeah.
So as when I started here at the Angel DeCora Museum, and even before that, when I started going to school here at Little Priest Tribal College, I had mentioned to Sunshine that I grew up in the city, because my grandma moved to the city in the 1950s, so my great-grandma. And then my grandma grew up here when she was 5 or 6, so she had come, from the res, moved here to Sioux City, from the Asante Sioux tribe. Okay, so now we're here in the city, and then my mom grew up here in the city, and then now I'm here, and I grew up in the city. So by the time it gets down to my generation, I feel like the effects from boarding school is still there, because not only I'm away from my culture, I'm away from traditions, I'm away from all of that, and so is my mom. So those effects to me, I feel like, and I told Sunshine, you can feel the shame, because I feel like my grandma grew up in a Catholic way, in a Christian way, and her mom really pushed that and pushed, telling her, you don't need the language anymore, you don't need these, you don't need to learn this anymore, because this is the way we're gonna learn. And I see those effects trickle down to me, because now I don't know. And now trying to come learn and relearn all these things is such a challenge, because for one, I'm an outsider, and I feel like an outsider. So when I started here at Little Priest, it was so crazy to me, because now I'm relearning all of these things that were never taught to me, and then realizing how much the history is not taught in the cities, in the school. So, one of the biggest things that really hurt me was when I had learned about Dakota 38. I had to learn that at 25 years old, taking a course here at Little Priest and having to write a paper about it, and that's the first time I'd ever even heard about that. You know, that was sad to me, and it made me feel like, what am I doing to learn about my own culture? What am I doing to learn about my tribe and my tribe's history? And, you know, it's embarrassing to me. Like, I feel like shame that I didn't know those things until now. So I think those are the effects. And then asking your grandma and having to ask your mom, like, you know, because they kind of don't know really either, because they grew up in the city too. So, you know, it's so challenging. So I feel like, you know, listening to Richard Pratt and listening to, you know, like reading these quotes and reading these things that were being put in place during that time, that was the whole plan in the long run. And I feel like how Sunshine said, they did succeed with some tribes, because we have tribes that are, you know, they're not here anymore because of a lot of the things that happened in history. So I feel like a challenge now here in 2022 for me anyways as an individual is having to relearn all these things, but having no access really, like my tribe is like almost 2 hours from Sioux City. You know, one thing I love about Winnebago is it's about 30 minutes from the city. So, you know, being here has really like helped me, even though I'm not from here, I'm not from this tribe, but it has helped me learn about history, about myself, even though, you know, it is the Winnebago tribe.
We survived so many things that we can't even fathom in our history to get where we are today. And then now, you know, we're doing something that, you know, we wouldn't have been able to do, you know, even 50, 60 years ago. You know, Jordan was just teaching how to make ribbon skirts at St. Augustine's, and that was our boarding school here on the reservation. Besides numerous other boarding schools. You know, there were 350 BIA-run boarding schools, or maybe, you know, a bit more, but around 350. So being able to now, in 2022, you know, go in and now we're teaching about our history and, you know, teaching about our culture. And I know a lot of people have the argument about, you know, ribbon skirts, you know, but I mean, at least we are doing something cultural, making them proud of themselves, you know, and we wouldn't even have been able to enter those doors and do that, you know, during the boarding school era.
Yeah, it wouldn't even been allowed, you know. Like, yeah. I was just talking to Sunshine about that, like, you don't feel like sometimes I'm doing things and I don't feel it, I'm not even seeing the big impact in the big picture, you know, like, because like I had shared with Sunshine before, you know, my mom grew up in the city. She was sometimes, I think she said in her class, there was like 5 or 6 Native Americans in her class. And when she had met my dad, she lied to him and she told him that she was Hawaiian. And I was telling Sunshine, I'm like, you know, like, why would you even say that? Like, you know, like, because Hawaiians are indigenous as well, but maybe to her, like, or to them, they thought it was like more like exotic or like to say I'm Hawaiian, you know. And my dad was like, oh, okay. Well, later on, he had been talking to her cousins, you know, like at school, and he's like, yeah, you know, I didn't know you guys were from Hawaii. And they're like, what? Like, we ain't from Hawaii? Like, you know, like, what? Denise isn't from Hawaii. She's from she's Santee. She's from the Santee Sioux tribe. She's DeCora, you know. And then they're like, he's like, why did you lie to me? And she said during that time there was so much in the city going on, like as far as like alcoholism and other things that, you know, a lot of people would tease her and call her a drunk or call her family, you know, oh, you guys are just a bunch of drunk, you know, Indians or whatever, and say stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, she just said that she was ashamed that she didn't, so she would just say that she wasn't, you know. So I told Sunshine, I got my niece, she had a round dance for her birthday in Santee, and I'd never been to a round dance before. Actually, when I started making ribbon skirts was for my little girl. We were going to go to a round dance before COVID hit in Macy, in the Omaha Nation, and we were going to go. And that was the first time I ever made a ribbon skirt. I didn't know what I was doing. I had to talk to my cousin. It was so square, it was all messed up, and the lines were just crazy. But I was just like so proud that she wanted to wear it and she wanted to dance, and like that was like how really, like, I feel like my daughter really pulled me into that, you know, like, and you know, and then it got canceled. So I was like, oh my gosh, because of COVID. So when I went to my niece's birthday party, that was the first time that I had ever been to a round dance, and that was something that they talked about there too. Like, you know, however many years ago, we would never be able to do this. It's illegal. And this last round dance that I went to, I remember Thelma Thomas, she had said something, and oh man, it just hit me in the heart, because she said, she was looking at all the girls and she was like, you know, it really brings a lot of pride to my heart, because, you know, I wouldn't have been able to wear this, you know, as a young girl, and maybe not even feel proud to wear it, but seeing these young girls dance and feel proud, you know, that's really something to see. So I told Sunshine that, you know, that's how, you know, impactful I feel when I go to these classrooms, because I'm like, man, these kids are proud. That's something I didn't get to do. As you know, like I said, I grew up not knowing much about my tribe or much
and
about
then
myself.
you get this romanticized, you know, history lesson in schools, and you know, being able to do what we do up here at the museum, and you know, it's not all, you know, great, you know, but it's what we're sharing is the truth. And like I said previous, you know, I think when we start sharing the truth and people start knowing the truth about, you know, what we've gone through in history, you know, and boarding schools, you know, boarding school is such a big topic right now across the country, but getting to know the real true history will help us heal as a people. And there was, where was we? We were somewhere, was that when we were working on bringing the Carlisle students back? But there was a letter that a chief wrote from, was that DeCora or?
I can't remember what tribe.
But do you remember what he said in the letter?
Yeah, his daughter had passed away.
In Carlisle, right?
In Carlisle, yes, yep. And he wanted to have the body returned. And so he wrote Richard Pratt multiple times. And this is what was shared to us in that meeting. And he reached out to him multiple times, and he never ever got a reply back. So, and all he wanted to do was bring his daughter home and have the proper burial for her. And not once did he get a message back or any kind of, you know, letter back.
Yeah, and then, I mean, you think of that as a parent, like me knowing that, first of all, my child was taken, you know, against their will, against my will, you know, and then you hear, you know, somehow you get a letter or something from the school that your child died, you know, and then what's the one thing you want to do? You know, you want to give them, you know, a good burial, you know, send them home, and then not even being able to do that. So, you know, if you really put yourselves in those shoes, you know, of our ancestors that went through these things, what would that do to you? You know, they're totally, completely breaking you at that point, you know. And then you turn to other things like alcoholism, you know, and whatever you can do, and you disassociate from everything else, you know. So the issues that we see in our communities across the country, you know, are, and they're not all bad. They're not all bad, you know. You see a lot of us trying to heal and trying to figure things out, and trying to help those that are still, you know, struggling. And I think that that's what we're trying to do with this video, is trying to get people feeling comfortable sharing their stories and seeing the good in them, even if the stories weren't all that great, because we all know that they aren't. But once you give a voice to those issues, I think the healing then starts, you know, no matter how many times you talk about it, or you know, you get a little bit of healing each time you talk.